September 12, 1958. 11:47 p.m. Inside the smoke-filled air of Lenox Lounge, the jazz was loud, but Big Sam's heart was louder. His hand was shaking, a microtremor he'd been fighting for 3 weeks, as he wrapped his fingers around the cold, checkered grip of the .38 special. $50,000. That was the price the 5 families of New York had placed on Bumpy Johnson's head. And Sam, Bumpy's personal shield for 5 years, the man Bumpy called brother, had finally taken the contract. The plan was a ghost's dream. Walk into the lounge. Wait for the Friday night rush. Wait for Bumpy to be distracted by the politicians and the cognac. One shot to the back of the head. Quick. Clean. Disappear into the night. Sam stepped out of the shadows. Bumpy was at his usual table, back turned, completely vulnerable. Sam drew the weapon, felt the weight of the metal, aimed at the base of the skull, and squeezed the trigger. The room went tomb silent. The saxophone died mid-note. Bumpy didn't flinch. He didn't run. He just set his glass of Hennessy down with a steady hand, turned around slowly in his chair, and looked Sam dead in the eyes. He didn't look angry. He looked disappointed. Bumpy leaned forward and whispered 5 words that would freeze the blood of every man in that room. "I've been counting on you." What the history books won't tell you, and what Big Sam didn't realize until that very second, was that Bumpy Johnson had known about the hit for 21 days. And what the King of Harlem did in those 3 weeks didn't just save his life, it changed the rules of power in the New York underworld forever. To understand how Bumpy turned a death sentence into a masterclass of psychological warfare, you have to understand the man he was in 1958. He wasn't just a gangster. He was a chess player in a world of checkers. In 1958, Bumpy Johnson wasn't just a man. He was an institution. While the Italian 5 families governed the rest of New York with cold, corporate brutality, Harlem was a sovereign nation, and Bumpy was its king. He was the Robin Hood of the ghetto, a figure who spent his mornings paying the rent for struggling widows and his afternoons ensuring the police didn't harass local black-owned businesses. But beneath the philanthropy was a crown forged in the numbers racket, a gambling empire worth millions in nickels and dimes. The Italians, led by the likes of Frank Costello, were tired of being locked out of this gold mine. They viewed Harlem as a colony waiting to be plundered, but Bumpy was the wall they couldn't climb. He didn't just rule through the barrel of a gun, he ruled through a deep-seated respect that the mob couldn't comprehend. When the Italians sent enforcers, Bumpy sent them back in ambulances. When they tried to bribe politicians, Bumpy's connections proved more ancient and loyal. The 5 families realized they couldn't take Harlem by force or by politics. To kill the king, they had to find a way to rot his heart from within. Every fortress has a crack, and every giant has an Achilles heel. For Big Sam, that weakness wasn't greed or ambition, it was a desperate, suffocating love. Sam was a 6 feet 4 inches mountain of a man who had been Bumpy's primary shadow for 5 years. He had taken 2 bullets for the king and mourned at the funeral of Bumpy's own mother. But while Sam was guarding the throne, his own house was burning down. His youngest daughter, Kesha, was dying of tuberculosis. In 1958, the treatment was a luxury Sam couldn't afford. The $2,000 Bumpy had gifted him months earlier had vanished into hospital fees and oxygen tanks. Sam was drowning in debt, watching his daughter's breath grow shallower every night in their cramped apartment. He was a man who would jump in front of a train for Bumpy Johnson, but he would burn the world down for his child. The Italian mob's intelligence specialist, Tony the Collector, didn't look for a man who wanted a Cadillac. He looked for a man who needed a miracle. He found Sam, not as a traitor, but as a father who had run out of options and time. On a sweltering August afternoon, a black Cadillac pulled up alongside Sam on 132nd Street. The window slid down to reveal Tony Maroney, a man who didn't look like a killer, he looked like a banker. Tony didn't lead with threats, he led with a briefcase. Inside were neat, banded stacks of $100 bills, $50, 000 in total. In 1958, that was enough to buy a mansion, a new identity, and the finest medical care in the country. "This money buys a clean hospital in Miami," Tony whispered, his voice smooth as silk. It buys clear air for your daughter to breathe. The price was a single moment of betrayal at Lenox Lounge. Tony laid out the ultimatum with surgical precision. Pull the trigger and save your family, or stay loyal and watch your daughter die in a charity ward. The only question, Sam, is whether you die a poor martyr or a rich father. Sam stared at the money, the literal price of his soul. He got out of the car without saying a word, but the briefcase stayed with him. That night, the weight of the cash under his bed was heavier than any sin he'd ever committed. The mob made one fatal mistake. They assumed Harlem was silent. But in Bumpy Johnson's world, the street has 1,000 eyes and 1,000,000 ears. Bumpy's intelligence network wasn't built of high-priced spies or wiretaps. It was built of the people the world ignored. Jerome, a humble parking attendant at a nearby social club, saw the Cadillac. He saw Big Sam get in. He saw the exchange of the briefcase. Within 2 hours, Jerome was in Bumpy's office above Small's Paradise. He handed over a scrap of paper with a license plate number and a description of Tony Maroney. Bumpy sat in the dim light for hours, the smoke from his cigar curling toward the ceiling. He didn't feel the hot sting of anger. He felt the cold, tactical clarity that had kept him alive through the Dutch-Schultz wars. He understood Sam's desperation. He even sympathized with it, but he also knew that treason is a contagion that must be neutralized. Most bosses would have had Sam disappeared into the East River by dawn. But Bumpy was a grandmaster. Killing Sam would only tell the Italians to find a new assassin. Bumpy wanted to destroy their confidence entirely. For the next 21 days, Bumpy Johnson conducted a masterclass in psychological warfare. He kept Sam closer than ever, inviting him to dinner and asking about Kesha's health with a kindness that felt like a hot iron against Sam's conscience. Every time Bumpy smiled, the guilt twisted deeper into Sam's gut. Meanwhile, Bumpy made a secret trip to a master gunsmith in Brooklyn named Victor. He didn't ask for a weapon that fired faster or harder. He asked for a dummy. He wanted a .38 special that was indistinguishable from Sam's service weapon. Same weight, same balance, same serial numbers, but with a firing pin that had been filed down to a rounded nub. It would look perfect, it would feel real, but it would never strike a primer. Bumpy needed Sam to commit the act of betrayal fully. He needed the world to see the intent, the attempt, and the ultimate failure. He was setting a stage where the only casualty wouldn't be a life, but the very idea that Bumpy Johnson could be touched. He was moving his pieces into a position where the Italians would lose before they even realized the game had begun. On September 8th, just 4 days before the scheduled hit, Bumpy moved his final piece. He sent Sam on a fabricated vital errand to the Bronx to pick up a sensitive package. It was a 3-hour window, all Bumpy needed. Accompanied by his most trusted lieutenant, Illinois Gordon, Bumpy entered Sam's apartment. They found the gun hidden exactly where Bumpy expected, in a shoebox under the bed, resting right next to the mob's blood money. With the steady hands of a surgeon, Bumpy swapped the real .38 for Victor's modified dummy. He didn't touch the $50,000. He didn't leave a note. He simply vanished back into the Harlem night. When Sam returned, he checked the shoebox. The cold steel felt the same. The weight was familiar. He had no idea that the tool of his salvation had been replaced by a paperweight. For the next 72 hours, Sam lived in a fog of terror and resolve, checking his watch every 10 minutes. He believed he was carrying his family's future in his waistband, unaware that he was actually carrying the instrument of his own social execution. The night of September 12th was electric, thick with the scent of expensive perfume and top-shelf bourbon. Lenox Lounge was packed to the rafters, the jazz band was swinging, and the city's elite were rubbing shoulders with the street's most dangerous men. Bumpy sat at his usual corner table, his back to the room, a position of deliberate vulnerability. He knew the 5 families had watchers in the crowd, men with stopwatches and nervous eyes, waiting for the king to fall. Sam arrived at 11:30 p.m. He looked like a ghost in a suit. He'd had 3 drinks at a bar down the street, but they hadn't steadied his hands, they'd only blurred the edges of his guilt. He positioned himself by the mahogany bar, his eyes fixed on the back of Bumpy's head. To the crowd, he was the ever-vigilant protector. To Bumpy, He was a man about to commit a sin that could never be washed away. At 11:47 p.m., Sam saw his opening. The waiter moved to clear the table, providing a momentary screen. Sam stepped forward, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. Sam drew the gun. The barrel was inches from Bumpy's skull. He squeezed the trigger with everything he had left. Click. That dry, hollow sound of metal hitting air echoed louder than any gunshot. The lounge fell into a vacuum of silence. The music stopped. The breathing stopped. Bumpy didn't jump. He slowly set his glass of cognac down, the ice clinking gently against the crystal, and turned his chair around. He looked at the shivering giant on his knees and whispered, "I've been counting on you." Bumpy reached into his breast pocket and pulled out a thick, white envelope. He tossed it at Sam's feet. Inside were receipts for every single one of Kesha's medical bills, paid in full by Bumpy's own hand that morning, along with a check for $5,000 for relocation. "I take care of my own, Sam. You chose their money over our brotherhood." Bumpy stood up, appearing 10 feet tall in the silent room. He didn't call for a hitman. He didn't reach for a blade. He simply showed Sam the mercy of a king and the disappointment of a brother. He exiled Sam from Harlem forever. The message sent that night was a seismic shift in the New York underworld. By dawn, the story of the clique had reached every mob boss from Boston to Baltimore. The 5 families called an emergency meeting in a basement in Little Italy. Frank Costello was ready to launch an all-out war, but Carlo Gambino, the most calculating of them all, held up a hand. "We can't beat a man who plays chess with our own soldiers," Gambino said quietly. "Harlem belongs to Bumpy Johnson. To move against him again is to invite our own destruction." For the first time in history, the Italian mob backed down from a territory without a single drop of blood being spilled. Bumpy Johnson ruled for another decade, eventually dying of a heart attack in the very same lounge where he'd faced down betrayal. He proved that the most dangerous weapon in the world isn't a gun or a briefcase of cash, it's a mind that stays 3 moves ahead of the enemy. The legend of Big Sam's trigger pull became a permanent reminder to the streets. In Harlem, loyalty isn't just a virtue, it's the only thing that keeps the wolves at bay. Bumpy Johnson's victory that night wasn't just about surviving an assassination, it was about the total psychological collapse of his enemies. By the time the sun rose over 135th Street, the Italian mob realized they weren't just fighting a gangster, they were fighting a ghost who could see through walls. Bumpy didn't need to fill the streets with bodies to prove his power, he simply used the truth to render the 5 families' millions worthless. He stayed the king of Harlem until his final breath in 1968, leaving behind a legacy that proved the smartest man in the room is always the most dangerous one. Big Sam disappeared into the gray fog of the Midwest, a man who saved his daughter's life but lost his soul in the process. He carried that click in his ears for the rest of his days, a reminder that while money can buy a hitman, it can never buy the kind of loyalty Bumpy Johnson built in the heart of Harlem. Outro/call to action. If this story of high-stakes betrayal and street-level chess got your heart racing, do me a huge favor, hit that like button right now. It helps the algorithm know we're bringing you the realest history on YouTube. And if you're not subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? We're dropping deep dives into the lives of legends like Bumpy Johnson every single week, and trust me, you do not want to miss our next episode on the secret war between Harlem and the Syndicate. Drop a comment below. Did Bumpy do the right thing by letting Sam walk? Or was mercy a sign of weakness? Let's talk about it in the comments. Turn those notifications on, and we'll see you in the next one. Remember, in this game, if you aren't thinking 3 moves ahead, you've already lost. Sunrise painted the sky in shades of gold and pink as state police vehicles lined the street outside the precinct. Officers in handcuffs were loaded into cruisers. Miller, Vance, Atkins, and 6 others implicated in the web of corruption Elias had unraveled. News vans arrived, cameras capturing everything, reporters already crafting narratives about small-town corruption and one man's quest for justice. Elias sat on his porch, Maya tucked securely under his arm, watching the spectacle unfold. The combat trance had finally released its grip. The cold stillness that had sustained him through the mission was fading, replaced by something warmer, more human. A familiar car pulled up, breaking through the police barricade with a wave of credentials. Sergeant Chen emerged, a genuine smile on his weathered face. "Heard you might need this," he called out. He opened the back door of his vehicle. A young German Shepherd puppy bounded out, silver-tipped coat gleaming in the morning light, eyes bright with puppy enthusiasm, completely unaware of the drama surrounding its arrival. Maya's eyes widened, life flooding back into her face for the first time in a week. "Really?" she whispered, almost afraid to hope. "Really?" Elias confirmed. She ran to the puppy, both tumbling into the grass in a tangle of laughter and excited barking. The sound was pure, unburdened, beautiful, the sound of healing beginning. Chen sat beside Elias on the porch steps, watching the scene with satisfaction. "Think you'll stay retired this time?" Elias watched Maya and the puppy play, watched her smile return, watched the weight lift from her small shoulders. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I think so." The debt was paid. The storm had passed, leaving only justice and the possibility of peace in its wake. The morning sun cast long shadows across the backyard where Maya threw a tennis ball for the third time. The German Shepherd puppy, no longer quite so small, bounded after it with unbridled joy, silver coat shimmering in the light. She'd named him Sentinel, and he lived up to that name, never leaving Maya's side. Elias watched from the kitchen window, coffee mug warm in his hands. The house had furniture now, comfortable, lived in, a real home rather than a tactical staging ground. Photos adorned the walls, Maya's school pictures, Sentinel's puppy photos, and one faded image of Barnaby that held a place of honor on the mantel. The trials had concluded last week. Miller got 8 years. Vance got 6. Sheriff Atkins got 15, plus forfeiture of his pension. The federal corruption investigation had spread beyond Oakhaven, touching 3 neighboring counties. 17 officers total faced charges. Mrs. Gable knocked on the back door, letting herself in as she always did these days. "Morning, Elias." Brought fresh muffins. She set the basket on the counter, then studied his face. "You sleeping better?" "Some," he admitted. The nightmares were fading, both the old ones from overseas and the new ones from the week he'd spent hunting corrupt cops. "Maya's doing better. That helps." Through the window, they watched Maya laugh as Sentinel knocked her gently into the grass, covering her face with puppy kisses. The sound of her laughter, pure and unguarded, was the sweetest victory Elias had ever known. "You did good, Elias," Mrs. Gable said softly. "Barnaby would be proud. Your brother would be proud." Elias nodded, unable to speak past the sudden tightness in his throat. Maya had been his brother's daughter, entrusted to him after his brother's death in combat 3 years ago. He'd failed to protect her from one horror, but he'd made damn sure justice was served. His phone buzzed, a message from Sergeant Chen. "K9 training program needs instructors. Interested?" Elias smiled. A new mission. A purpose beyond vengeance. A way to channel everything he'd learned into something constructive. He typed back, "When do I start?" Outside, Maya called out, "Uncle Elias, come play with us." He set down his coffee and headed for the door. The commander was gone. The guardian remained. And that was exactly who he needed to be. Oakhaven Memorial Park stretched out beneath a perfect afternoon sky, alive with the sounds of children playing on swings and families spreading picnic blankets on the grass. It was idyllic, normal, everything the town should have been all along, before corruption had rotted it from within. Elias and Maya walked hand in hand along the winding path, their destination a small memorial stone beneath an ancient oak tree. Fresh flowers, daisies and sunflowers, Barnaby's favorite colors according to Maya, rested against the smooth granite. The inscription was simple but powerful: "Barnaby, loyal friend, brave protector, forever loved." Maya knelt before the stone, her small fingers tracing the carved letters. "I told Sentinel about you today," she said softly, as if Barnaby could hear her from wherever good dogs go. "I think you two would have been friends." Elias knelt beside her, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. "I know you would have." From her pocket, Maya pulled out a small toy, Barnaby's favorite squeaky ball, worn smooth from years of play and love. She placed it carefully at the base of the memorial, a final offering to her fallen friend. "Thank you for making them pay, Uncle Elias," she whispered, her voice carrying the weight of everything she'd lost and everything she'd learned about justice in the months since. Elias was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "Maya, I need you to understand something. What I did, it was necessary. But it's not a path I want you to follow. Justice matters. But so does mercy. So does forgiveness, in time." Maya looked up at him, her young face thoughtful beyond her years. "Did you forgive them?" He paused, weighing truth against comfort. "I held them accountable. That's different. Forgiveness, that's something you do for yourself, when you're ready. Not for them." Maya nodded slowly, processing wisdom that most adults struggled to grasp. "I'm not ready yet." "That's okay," Elias assured her, pulling her close. "You don't have to be." In the distance, Sentinel's joyful bark cut through the air. Sergeant Chen waved from across the park, where a small group had gathered for the afternoon's dog training session, part of the new K9 program Elias had helped establish, ensuring that police dogs and their handlers received proper training and oversight. "Come on," Elias said, rising and offering Maya his hand. "We've got work to do." They stood together, fingers intertwined, and began walking toward their future, not defined by what had been taken from them, but by what they were building together. The sun warmed their faces, and the breeze carried the scent of fresh grass and possibility. "Uncle Elias?" Maya looked up at him as they walked. "Will you teach me to be brave like you?" Elias smiled, the expression transforming his usually stern features. "Maya, you're already the bravest person I know." They continued across the park, their shadows stretching long behind them. Around them, the community was healing. New leadership at the police department, transparency initiatives, civilian oversight boards. The changes wouldn't happen overnight, but they were happening. Justice had been served, and now the harder work of rebuilding trust could begin.